Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise Diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. Well, welcome, Nathan. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. For anyone that may not know, you're one of the seminarians here in the Boise Diocese, and we're excited to chat with you in preparation for the trap shoot here in a couple of weeks. And we thought we might just get to know you a little bit more as we encourage everyone to help support you in your ministry and going through your vocation. So welcome on.
Thank you.
So I think a good place to start would be to tell us a little about you and your family and how you grew up.
Okay. So I grew up in California. I'm the second of four, and um, my parents were divorced when I was 3, and we split living with them about half the time. My mom was Catholic, my dad wasn't, and so with that we would go to mass about half the time until I was a little bit older. Then we started going to mass with my dad as well. He would take us, and I went to Catholic school until 8th grade, and I was involved in Boy Scouts at the parish. I had lots of friends at the parish. Um, and yeah, there was never really a question or a doubt in my mind about the truth of what the church believes. Um, Certainly a struggle in living that out and trusting in God's promises. But as far as just knowing the truth of it and the truth of God and in his mercy, that was not something that came difficultly or as a difficulty. Um, and yeah, so I grew up in Fresno, California. I moved from there when I was 20 to Idaho. I had lots of family there. My family, my mom and I, we were kind of like the last in a chain migration of all of my mom's sisters and her parents to move to Boise. And uh, yeah, so we did that when I was 20, so about 4 years ago, right around now. And I had been discerning for a few years. And so I actually moved as I entered seminary. So I moved to Idaho, lived there for a week, and then was in seminary a week later. So I'd been in communication with Father Dale for several months by then, almost a year. And he had accepted me to discern for the diocese. Uh, I went to Bishop White Seminary for 3 years, which is in Spokane, Washington. It's a college seminary. I completed my philosophy degree. And then I came to the St. Paul Seminary to begin theology last year, and I have completed my first year in theology. And so I've got 3 more years. So
And so I think that's really interesting. Sometimes I think when we have a parent that isn't Catholic, sometimes that can make it harder for us to follow our faith. But in your case, you said you had no doubt. So that brings me to the question of the priesthood. So when did you start to think more seriously about the priesthood?
yeah. So actually, my dad did just become Catholic this last Easter.
Praise
Um,
God. That's
yeah,
amazing.
that was a real gift. Um, and I would say that the lack of doubt was really an intellectual thing. It was just kind of uh, it was in the theory, but not really in the practice. It was more difficult to live it out, just kind of generally. But the question of the priesthood, that didn't come up until I was I think I was 17. And I remember once the thought of being a priest going through my mind beforehand. And it was only once. And I remember my mom and we were in the living room. I think we were watching some movie and there might have been a priest in it. And my mom just made this comment like the families of priests are very blessed. And that was it. And I don't even think that it really came to me as a question or a possibility or an option I hadn't really seen a young priest before. I hadn't really seen a seminarian growing up, and so it wasn't really an option for me. But then, after going through the first few years of high school, um, I, was kind of struggling with various things, various sins, various, yeah, just I think normal teenage struggles, um, friendship, and just kind of like asking the question, what am I doing here? All of those things. But just having this strong intuition or knowledge that what the church believes is true and what the church teaches about God and Christ and the salvation offered to us is true. Um, and I've always been inclined to seek truth. I've always been inclined to know and to understand reality and to know what is true and kind of to commit myself to the truth in a very determinate way. Um, I was just praying this one Lent, or just before Lent started, asking our Blessed Mother, what should I do for Lent? And I kind of received in that prayer to pray the rosary every day and to go to Mass every day. And so this is in the middle of my junior year of high school, and so I would drive to Mass and then at 6:45 a.m. and then I would drive to school and pray a rosary on the way. And in the last couple of years, I've realized or I've remembered something, and I think that this is really kind of where the seed of my vocation was planted. And it was when I was about, I don't know, maybe 11 or 12. And it was right around this time of year, because after Mass one day, there was a scapular investiture. So Our Lady of Mount Carmel, we celebrated 2 days ago. And so the brown scapular is kind of a devotion to her. And I remember being 11 or 12, and they were doing this after Mass. And I just kind of looked around, like, no one is really going. Um, and then I just had this desire to go. And so kind of got up quickly, went to the back, grabbed the scapular, just kind of spontaneously, and went down to the foot of the altar, and I was invested with the brown scapular. And it didn't really mean too much to me then, and I actually stopped wearing the scapular for some time. Um, but the importance of that, and I think the reason that this was where the seed of my vocation was planted, is it was kind of the first act in like for the church that I participated in by myself. And also, I've always just kind of attributed my vocation to Our Lady, and she kind of claimed me there in a very particular way, keeping me safe so that eventually I can be where I am today. And so back to my junior year of high school, when I asked that question to Our Lady and I started going to Mass every day, after a few weeks, this woman came up to me and she asked me if I was planning on being a seminarian. And this was really the first time that the question like kind of hit me in a powerful way. And it's interesting because many, many priestly vocations come by way of a mediating person. Um, often it can be a desire planted from very young or at some other point, but very often it's like it takes someone to kind of break the mind and break the heart and all of the plans that we have. And so that's what this question did for me, is it made it from not an option to an option and a question that I had to answer. So now all the plans that I had for my life, all of my desires, they were now like kind of shaken because those were things that I desired. Now I have to answer this question about what God desires for me. And so I was filled with a lot of fear. Um, and and I said no. I'm not planning on being a seminarian. I'm going to have a family and all those things, all those good things. But the question stayed with me very, very powerfully and very annoyingly. Um, and then the pastor of the parish, he asked me the same question 2 weeks later. And then he asked me again. I gave him the same response, and then he asked me again the following week. But then for about 3 years, the question would just continually pose itself to me every day because I would still go to mass, I would still pray the rosary every day. I was still trying to grow in virtue and in holiness. And so the question was just constantly coming up. And then after a few years, um, during COVID, I was going to adoration every day too. And just after some time, the possibility, it became more of a possibility, something, something in my heart softened. I was like, okay, Lord, I will at least allow myself to be asked this question. And then very quickly, it was like, okay, I'm going to do this, or at least talk to the vocation director. Um, and so that's like, yeah, that's the vocation story, I guess.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting because I interviewed Father Tim a couple weeks back, probably a couple months by this point. Um, but one of the things he talked about in his is that it was a very soft call, but it was annoying because it would never go away. So it's funny
Mhm.
to hear the same words come out of your mouth where it's like, okay, Lord, like and he said it, and it was never like nagging or like aggressive. It was just always this like very soft call, like, are you going to consider this? Are you going to consider this? So it's so funny to hear that you had a similar situation
Mhm.
in that. And then even when I had Father Hippolytus on as well, he also talked about it's not this aggressive call, it's this very soft like call that's consistent. And so I feel like that's a really beautiful thread that might be similar in a lot of people's hearts, you know? And
Yeah,
I also think that like you said, it's really important, I think, for other people if they see those virtues and that maybe someone might be inclined to be a good priest to encourage that. I think oftentimes we either don't want to get involved or we kind of just look past it or like, oh, when someone maybe eventually gets that question asked to them and they say yes, then you can be like, oh yeah, I totally could see that. I could totally see you being a great priest or whatever, right? Instead of just
hmm
saying like, hey, have you ever thought about that? Um, I think that can be really important because often I think we have in our heads like default vocations. I think many times in the United States, because we don't have an abundance of religious life, or seminarians being very active. I mean, we have parish priests that we see, right? I think sometimes our default is like, oh, I'm just going to get married and have kids you know, and go through that path. So I think it's really beneficial to get asked that question and kind of have to think about that as a vocation. You may have already talked about this, but what do you think was the hardest part about saying yes in your vocation? You might have already alluded to it, but
yeah, I think I did. And it was really just giving up like my desires or my plans that I had already kind
hmm
of committed myself to, um, or just the plans for my life that I just had to give up. Um, yeah, I think that would be it.
I think after you kind of commit yourself to something like that, it can be hard to give that up.
hmm
Okay. And so you're in seminary and you've been to two seminaries at this point, right? Because one was
hmm
more, was it a college seminary? You said it was a college seminary, so there was both people that were just going to college and also going to and people also going to seminary, is that correct? Or was it
Yeah.
mostly just for seminarians?
So a college seminary is at least the one that I went to. We were at the University of Gonzaga,
Mm,
but there was a seminary where there were 16 of us. We lived, we ate, we prayed. Um, we had our formation, we had our own masses. We were separate. We just took classes at the university.
yeah. Okay.
So, so it is a seminary. It's just attached or affiliated to the college.
Yeah.
So,
And then I guess in terms of the seminary, what kind of, you talked about earlier these abundant gifts that you were given, and this, I guess that was in our little offshoot video that we did earlier, but you were talking about how you've received these abundant gifts through the seminary. So could you kind of elaborate on those and, what has been something that's really strengthened your faith at this point going through the seminary?
so we have, at least in seminary formation, we have these four dimensions that we talk about or that we are formed in. We're formed in human formation, spiritual formation, intellectual formation, and pastoral formation. So I'll share kind of just a grace from each one of those. I think the important thing is like we can't split the person into four parts,
Right.
which is why they're dimensions. And so, I mean, of course, it's integrated in me, but just four different gifts, and the language is helpful. Um, so I would say a grace in human formation, or at least I'll give the purpose of this dimension, and then I'll give the grace. So the purpose of human formation is so that we may be a bridge for others to come to Christ and not an obstacle. And so I would say a grace that I've received in this part is just a deeper confidence and knowledge of who I am in Christ, such that I can more freely engage with others as a bridge that they may meet Christ. Spiritual formation, the purpose of that is to just kind of the basis. It's ultimately our heart, the way that we are intimate with the Lord and allow Him to conform us to Himself. And so I'd say a grace in spiritual formation is just a deeper knowledge of who Christ is and who I am in Him, which just allows me to, I don't know, to just kind of live in the life of grace ultimately. So allowing Christ to work in me and to speak to my heart, to come to know Him more deeply in Scripture, to become more aware of the gifts that He's given me, and being free to use those in yeah, just in in a way that they're His and not just mine.
Yeah.
Intellectual formation, that is just it's ultimately about the renewal of the mind. It's not just about learning things. It's not just about memorizing information about the hypostatic union, all of these theological terms. But it's ultimately about the renewal of the mind, the way that we see the world. And I would say that this is the principal grace that I've received, which is just a complete renewal of my mind, or a continuing renewal of my mind, so that in all of the philosophy that I studied and all of the theology, everything kind of informs the way that I see the world and I see others. And especially now that I'm in theology, everything that I learn about Jesus Christ or the Trinity informs the way that I pray, even because it allows me to see more clearly the one that we adore. Uh, and so that is incredibly powerful as far as intellectual formation. And then pastoral formation, that is kind of the where the previous three dimensions come to be integrated, because the purpose of the priest's life, the purpose that I believe God is calling me to, is pastoral charity. So to pour myself out like Christ for the sake of the flock. And so a grace that I've received, I would say, in pastoral charity or at pastoral formation, um, is maybe a deeper confidence or creativity or knowledge of the gifts that God has given me for the people of God. So, and coming to know those, I mean, to have that self-knowledge and being able to accept those gifts, eventually in the future, with the grace of orders, being able to be poured out in those gifts, or where I have weaknesses, allowing God to strengthen me there with His grace, because I mean I'm still going to have to do those things that I'm weak in. So just a deeper confidence and um, growth in that area, I would say. And to answer the question about where has or what has strengthened my faith in seminary or faith in God so far in seminary, um, hmm, one of the challenges in seminary is that it's very unlike the other states in life, because in a family, as when a man and a woman begin dating or when they're engaged, there's not a ton that changes between before marriage to after marriage. Then they're going to have children, but the lifestyle is not radically different. With a religious person, it's quite similar. When a brother or a sister enters a monastery or a convent, the day that they enter the religious life, they're going to be living that way, pretty much that way until they die.
Hmm.
With some changes, of course. But in seminary, the way that I'm living now is quite different from the way that I'm going to be living as a priest. I live with 100 other guys in a building. I'm not celebrating any sacraments. I'm not spending most of my time with the people who I'm going to be ministering to. I'm studying or I'm doing all of these other things, very inwardly focused, so that I can be prepared and matured, kind of ready to go and be a shepherd. And so it's this weird and very challenging, uh, constant period of transition, which requires a lot of faith to trust that it will all be okay. Because it doesn't, sometimes it feels like priesthood is so far away, or I'm not growing in a place that I want to grow in, or there's just all of these different things that the evil one or even, my own mind can kind of trick me into or kind of spiral down into. And so seminary is just a constant purification of faith and hope, allowing God to just continually carry me through here in hope that one day I will be ordained. And so it's just this constant purification process. And I think that has strengthened my faith a lot, because it doesn't always feel the best
Hmm.
or the easiest, but just trusting in God's promises increases my faith. So,
Yeah. At one point earlier, when you were talking about the four pillars of your formation, you talked about how your view of Christ has changed a little bit. Could you go into that just a little deeper?
yeah. Um,
Because I think I understand a little bit of what you're saying. Um, just because I think so often we are so busy going through our day that we almost stop to realize that someone else is going through the same experience that we are. I don't know if you've
mm,
ever felt that way where you're like, I said this before, I think. But I was driving the car and I looked over and I saw this woman driving and I was like, wow, she is having a completely total different life than I am. And like she has all these experiences and pains and joys, and that's amazing.
mhm.
So, yeah. Anyways, I'll let you continue. I don't want to put words into your mouth, but that's kind of what I was thinking is I wonder if through your deeper studies of humanity, if you've been able to do um, any connections like that with Jesus, I suppose.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I understand the question. Um, yeah, so I mean, just kind of with your story, that is a really interesting thing, and it's something that has really come up this last year because I'm in a seminary with 100 guys, and we all have very different gifts, very different weaknesses, different personalities, different ways in which we pray and kind of are. And at first, that's kind of difficult because, wow, this guy is really good at this. I wish I had this gift as well. Or, uh, or it's just kind of, there's an ambiguity. Like there's not just one way to live in seminary. And so that can be kind of hard. But then on the flip side, it's also super beautiful because it shows the creativity of God in kind of a concentrated area. So what you were experiencing, I think, in the car is the creativity of God in the way that His grace works in our life in a very unique and personal way. And we participate in that in His creativity, which is such a gift. But as far as a way in which I've come to know Jesus more, I would say it's just a purification in kind of how he works in our life and, in each one of our lives. Because I think one of the ways in which I came into seminary, or one of the mindsets that I had coming into seminary, it was much more of a transactional understanding of a relationship with God. And it ultimately is like kind of uh, kind of Pelagian, but it's really just it's transactional. I have to do these things. I have to uh, I have to pray. I have to do all of these different things because I'm in relationship with God. And what it does is it forgets this personal and this personal relationship, but also the indwelling. Right, by our baptism, we've been saved. We've been completely washed clean and given the Holy Spirit. And what does Jesus say? He says, if you keep my commandments, my Father will love you and we will come to dwell within you. And so I think the purification of my image of Jesus is one in which, because a transactional understanding of Jesus is he's outside of me. He's apart from me, and I have to get to him with these different things that I'm doing. But a more true understanding of Jesus is he's the one living in me and doing these things, using me. I mean, I'm doing them, and yeah, that's true. Like I'm talking to you right now. I, he uses our faculties. He uses our intellect, our will, our memory, and this is like how he conforms us to himself by the Holy Spirit. And so it's a kind of a shift in my understanding of how Jesus works in my life. It's one that is not as a kind of imposition or external thing that I must do, but the freedom to kind of just live with him in peace. Because there's not much peace in a transactional relationship with
Yeah.
Christ.
Yeah.
Because I will never be able to meet what I desire. I will never be able to do everything I want to do and all of that. But if I come to understand how Christ dwells in me in his love and really in his mercy, his complete mercy, then it frees me to actually live with him in every moment. Not that every one of my thoughts has to be about Jesus, but he conforms me to himself and we come to know him more deeply in the scriptures and in prayer and in the sacraments. And something that you mentioned earlier with the thread between the two priests and my vocation story, um, it's kind of this gentle whisper. It's kind of like Elijah when he's at the
Hmm.
cave at Mount Horeb. There's not this loud thing happening, but where is God? He's in the still small voice. And so Jesus, as he dwells in us, he uses that still small voice, not loudly that we might do something, but gently that we might really participate in his creativity and in his freedom and in his charity. So I would say that that's one way that my image of Jesus has changed while in seminary. Uh,
I
and that
think,
would be
oh,
one
sorry.
of the gifts. It's one of the gifts. So,
It's interesting that you say that because this like last week, I had this time in my life where I was like just so busy with work, with the kids, with everything, and I just felt kind of crazy. And I remember all I wanted to do was just like look at my phone and scroll. And my 2-month-old woke up and I looked at her and I picked her up and I looked at her and I said, I choose you. I choose you. I choose you over my phone. But I think there's something deeper in that because again, when you were talking about the transactional thing, like I have to do this for you. And when I was saying I choose you, what I was really saying, like, and I actually knew this in my head. It wasn't like a later thought. Like I knew this. I was thinking, yes, Lord, I will do what you've put in front of me as my vocation. like I will be dutiful and I will like look at this child and play with her, even though I just finally got the other kids to sleep and I would really like a break. You know, I choose you. I choose this vocation. And in a way, as you were talking, I was thinking, wow, that's in a similar way when you're called to your vocation, right? When you're called to your vocation, you're going to go through this transformation and it might be different in different avenues, right? But it's still
Mhm.
kind of that same thing where I have to develop that relationship with God and how He's calling me to do that, right?
Yeah.
That's kind
No,
of,
that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
well, no, I
That's
mean, your story was the one that brought it up. So,
yeah, but that's just, the life of holiness, the life of grace. Whatever our vocation is, that's ultimately the purpose. And so God will bring about um, relationship with Him and a deeper knowledge and union with Him by whatever means. And the vocation that we're called to is the means.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I'll just finish up with a few questions. These are going to be a little more fun. So, outside of the seminary, what have been some of your favorite hobbies and activities to do?
Um, I get asked this question a lot, and it's always kind of a challenge because uh, I like to do a lot of seminary things. I like to read a lot. I like to spend a lot of time with my friends. I enjoy bouldering, so
Oh,
kind of
cool.
rock climbing, different things. I hurt my shoulder, so I haven't done it in a while, but I enjoy that very much. Um, I love going on walks and just thinking. Um, and I don't know, I like different things like frisbee or going on hikes and camping. I also like doing puzzles.
Oh,
So,
I love puzzles. Okay, and then I guess, what does it mean for the Catholic community here in Boise? Um, what does it mean to you when you hear that they're coming together to support you and your vocation?
I mean, it certainly means a lot because they're the reason I'm here, and and I know that, uh, and I know that there are thousands of people who pray for me, uh, and I don't know all of them. A lot of them write me letters, and which I mean, it is also such a gift to just have the support and the prayer. Um, but I think one of the biggest gifts is just when I go back to the diocese and I just show up at a parish in Boise, or I show up kind of really anywhere in the diocese now, and there are people who know me and people who I can check in with, and I can just continually come to know them more deeply. ICYC is a great place that this happens
Yeah.
because I just see people who I only see a couple times a year, and then I can just catch up with them. Um, yeah, I mean, it means an incredible amount. It's not really like there's not a lot of things that I could say about it,
Hmm.
um, but like everyone in the Diocese of Boise, every person in Idaho, like that's the reason that I'm here in seminary, each one of them, um, so that they can come to know Christ and allow Him to bring them salvation and sanctification. Uh, so yeah, it means a lot.
I have one other question for you before another fun question. But one other question would be, we talked about this before, but say someone is so okay, so what if there's like a young man right now who is kind of stuck in the default. They've never kind of contemplated what they would do. They're just like, "Oh yeah, I'll grow up, get married, have a job," that kind of thing. Um, what would you advise them to do, or what kind of step would you advise them to do to maybe potentially open up to the idea of a vocation in the priesthood? Sorry, I was gonna say and the religious life, but I'll just stick with the priesthood for the priesthood.
Okay, yeah, we love the religious too.
We do.
Um, yeah, so there's something that I was receiving while you were asking that question was where is the Lord calling us out of our mediocrity?
Mm.
And so for any young man, there's always a place in our life where we're experiencing our own mediocrity and we hate it.
Mm-hmm.
That's something like particular to the heart of a man to just like, I don't want to be mediocre, I want to be the best, or I want to be excellent. And there's a virtue of magnanimity, great souledness, that we're called to live in that, because Christ was ultimately magnanimous. It's a stretching of the mind to great things. And so for any young man, even if he's living a super holy life, or he's just coming to know Christ, wherever a young man is, there's always going to be a place, a thorn in our side in which we're experiencing our own mediocrity. And so I'd ask the question, where is Christ calling you to excellence? Because ultimately that's going to be our vocation. Like our vocation is going to be the hardest, but also the best place that we can really become excellent and really become magnanimous. And so if you are a Catholic man, just asking the Lord, is this what you might want for me? He doesn't want to leave us in a place of just kind of default. And he really does want to call us to excellence. I mean, that's the life of the saints. They all were living excellent lives, lives of virtue, lives of holiness. And yeah, and so I would just appeal to that desire in a young man, because that's just kind of the reality. The world is, Pope Benedict XVI. I keep this on my desk because I really love this quote. So it's the world offers you comfort, but you were not made for comfort. You were made for greatness. And I find that to be very, very inspiring, very powerful for me. That doesn't mean you have to be a priest, but it means you have to ask the question.
Oh my gosh. I have so enjoyed this. And I mean, without knowing you more than I do now, I can see that it does seem like there is this um like flourishing of your soul. Like you can tell that you're I see, or what I see now and what I've talked to you, there's like this great peace. And I think that's another thing we have to look out for too in vocations, is there has to be this peace. Uh yeah. And so I just want to thank you so much for coming on today. And I'm so glad that we were able to talk a little bit before. For anyone that wants to support Nathan, we are going to be having the trap shoot here. That's going to be August 1st. If you're watching this after August 1st, go ahead and leave a comment down in below, or you can reach out to us at any of our social media. That would be Desert Wanderers Podcast on Instagram, or the Salt and Light page, and we'll get you connected on how you can help support our seminarians here in Boise. So thank you, Nathan. Is there any other final words that you'd like to say, or?
I'm praying for the diocese all the time. So,
And we will continue to pray for you as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
thanks, Natalie. God bless you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up, as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week, and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.